Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Unfound Now. I am Unfound's host, Ed Denzel. Unfound is a true crime podcast that comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. We've covered about 225 disappearances in that time, and that is all we do. You can find Unfound on Audible, on Pandora, Spotify, iTunes, Podomatic, Stitcher, iHeart, a variety of places. In addition, you can find all of the episodes right here on this YouTube channel, the Unfound Podcast Channel. So what is Unfound Now? I started Unfound because I wanted the opportunity to cover more recent disappearances. It's a monthly program, and so I will look at disappearances that have occurred in the last couple of months and decide which one is a good one to cover, of course, to raise awareness, but a disappearance that I think we can use as a teaching moment. I'm all about education. The program is all about education. My assistants who help me with Unfound are all about education. Us, of course, learning more about disappearances, but also teaching the public like all of you. And on the regular episodes that come out on Fridays, we have a rule that a disappearance has to be at least a year old before we will cover it for that program. There are a variety of reasons for that I've discussed and written about many times over the last 5 years. Whereas with Unfound Now, I am looking at very new disappearances. So here we are at the end of September, and we are going to, I am going to be discussing and showing you a map regarding the disappearance of Michael Vaughan, a 5-year-old from Fruitland, Idaho. We started this Unfound Now in the summer of 2020, but this is, I believe, the first really, really young person child that we have covered for Unfound Now. And in fact, we do very little of that even in the regular episodes, and I will be talking about that a little later in this video. But once again, Michael Joseph Vaughan, 5 years old, went missing from Fruitland, Idaho on July 27th, so exactly 2 months ago. I'm recording this on September 27th of 2021, between the hours of 6:30 p.m. and 7:15 p.m. He was last seen near the intersection of South Arizona Avenue and Southwest 9th Street, going east. It's kind of on the edge of town, and once again, in the middle of this video, I am doing a map that you will see in a few moments where I look at that particular street and the surrounding area. Now, if you've seen some of these Unfound Nows before, you know that with every one of these, I like to bring up some points that will then be discussed later in the video. Kind of, once again, teaching moments, lessons that can be learned. Because once again, although I do these videos to raise awareness, and in fact, that's what we do in the regular audio episodes as well, this is also about teaching all of you. When you run across a disappearance in the news or in your area where you live, maybe you can be more astute in looking at it, and who knows, maybe you can add something to that investigation. Of course, that's what we're always hoping for. People coming forward, people knowing things, people being able to analyze disappearances, and maybe look at it in a way that others haven't. And the only way to do that is to be educated on them. So the 3 lessons for this particular video, and I will be using Michael's disappearance as a framework regarding these 3 points, is number 1, the mystery of incomplete news. Number 2, age matters. And number 3, the truth about child disappearances. So now I'm going to take you to Google Maps, show you that street, show you the surrounding area, tell you some things that I observe looking at the area, combining that with in consideration of Michael's age of only being 5 years old, then we will come back and I will go into these 3 points in much more depth, using Michael's disappearance as a template, and also talking to you about some other disappearances Unfound has covered as examples. Okay, here is a satellite view of the neighborhood where Michael went missing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can get an idea of the lay of the land. So 1,000 feet or maybe a half mile in a variety of directions, just to show you where Michael could have gone. Of course, keeping in mind that he is only 5 years old. And then I'm going to then point out some things that I personally notice about this area, and in particular, that street where Michael went missing. So once again, we're looking at this area in particular right here, South Arizona Avenue, Southwest 9th Street, and he disappeared right on this street. In fact, I saw in a couple different places. The best report we have is that he was seen 5 years old walking east, so in this direction. And we're going to get into the news accounts of this after this video. So I'm going to zoom out, and I think what you're going to see is that this neighborhood is kind of on the fringes of Fruitland, Idaho. This is downtown Fruitland right here, and that area that we just were is right here. Of course, off to the west, we see the Snake River. This is the Snake River that Evel Knievel infamously tried to jump over. What was it, in the 1970s? This is the river, but of course not right around here. So this borders Fruitland on the west. Certainly needs to be taken into account. And then when we zoom in and look at the area to the east, if he would have been going this way, not a lot. Not a lot to see here. Of course, we don't see any woods. We don't see any places that what I would say would be hard to search. We see all these little rectangles and squares, obviously of fields that I understand just recently have been harvested. That was how one of the ways that this story continues to be in the news, because I think what investigators were hoping is that, unfortunately, of course, this would probably mean that Michael was deceased, but investigators were hoping that in the harvesting of these fields, that his remains might be found. And once again, that would be a very sad end to this story, but they did do that. And we have to remember that this disappearance is now almost 2 months old. So that's the area. So I'm going to zoom in here again, right down here to Arizona Avenue, South Arizona Avenue, and Southwest 9th Street, right there in the middle of the screen. So here are some things that are important to me in knowing this address and looking at this area. First of all, I could find no information that says that Michael and his family live on this street, on Southwest 9th Street or South Arizona Avenue. There is a person with the last name Vaughan, and it's a very unusual spelling of the name Vaughan. Usually it's Vaughn, but they spell their name Vaughhan. There is someone by that last name who lives on this street. But I could find no information that says that either Michael's mother or father, not only could I not find anything that they lived on this street or any of these other streets, I could find no address that connected them to Fruitland, Idaho at all. The only city that I could find them connected to is Pocatello, Idaho. So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit once we go away from the map, but I think everybody's impression is that this family lives on this street and Michael walked away. It very well may be. But I thought it was important to tell all of you that I'm not sure Michael and his family lived on the street. I'm under the impression that they might have been visiting somebody on this street. I'm very open to that idea. These databases that you can find online that I pay for, other podcasters use them as well. True crime podcasters use them. They are not 100%. I would put it in a 90-some% accuracy range, but none of them are 100%. But I thought that that's something all of you should know. That there is a Vaughan that lives on this street, but I could find no connection to either Michael's father or mother having lived on the street or anywhere else in Fruitland, Idaho. Number two, as I mentioned, that the fields in this area were harvested. Now, I think that's very important. I think that that was a great thing to do, but we have to remember that Michael's only 5 years old. How far do we really think that he could have gone? Now, granted, if he went missing at 1 a.m, it's dark. Nobody would see anything, presumably. Fruitland, Idaho, I'm guessing it's not like Las Vegas or New York City, 24/7 town. So you could see conceivably a little boy gets out, runs away. It's 1 a.m, it's dark, everybody's in bed, and he might be able to go for a long time. But the time frame that we have here is 6:30 in the evening to 7:15. And in July, I don't think sunset in Idaho was until after 8 o'clock. So it's evening, but surely everybody can still see very easily. And so how far are we supposed to believe he could have gone by himself without anybody seeing him? Maybe he could get to the edge of the street, but I see this Route 30 here. I see other buildings and businesses. I see Fruitland Middle School. Maybe there are something going on there, some summer activity. So I get it that they did a lot of harvesting, but my impression is that any harvesting of any of these fields outside this immediate area would be irrelevant, in my opinion. Especially considering it's a 5-year-old. Now, if it's a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, then that is something different. In addition, we have to look at, moving on to my next point, yes, there is this river over here, but it's kind of the same issue that, yes, first of all, he was seen going in an east direction, opposite way of the river, but even so, are we to believe that a 5-year-old, I measured this is about 3,000 feet, so 2/3 of a mile. Are we supposed to believe he went in that direction? It doesn't make any sense that he could go the whole way across here, make it across this I-84, no cars seeing him. Might have gone up in that direction, but as a 5-year-old, would he even know the river is there? Where is he going? It's a little hard to understand. That is something. Whereas this is somebody older, that might make more sense, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Another point about looking at this map that catches my eye, and this does, I'm not going to deny it, it could bring in an idea of some sort of cover-up. I see these swimming pools right here. Over here, these swimming pools that are in the immediate area of where he was last seen. Kids go drowning in swimming pools all the time in the summer in the United States. It's very, very sad. Usually it's their own swimming pools. Maybe a parent just loses track. Little boy, little girl goes out into the back, falls into the pool, can't swim. It happens. Once again, very, very sad. I don't know how many stories there are of children drowning in somebody else's pool by happening to wander into a backyard and fall into a pool and drown. I'm not saying it's never happened. It's just not as common. However, maybe we should be open to that. Is it possible that he did go down this direction? Maybe he knew maybe he'd been down there the day before hanging out with some other children and gone swimming and wanted to go back down there to do more swimming, goes down there, falls in the pool, drowns, and then somebody starts worrying about a lawsuit and a neighbor covers it up. I have never, ever heard of a situation like that ever. That doesn't mean that it's never happened. It certainly would be horrible on all accounts if that were to be revealed in this particular disappearance. But being that it's 2 months later, Michael hasn't been found, we might have to get a little creative in thinking about any type of theory. So it's summer. Who knows if these pools are blocked off adequately, if these people were home, are there fences, are there gates? It's just something that came to mind as I'm looking at this satellite view. The other point is that this Southwest 9th Street, it's almost like a dead end. So if we are to think that could somebody have picked him up, well, it's not really a neighborhood where I think the cars going somewhere else would just be happening to drive through, and you have maybe a sex offender or somebody driving through, sees Michael walking along the street by himself and picks him up. It seems to me the way I look at this is that this is really just a little neighborhood. It's almost like a dead end. The only people that would be going into this neighborhood are people who live there. Not a lot of cars just trying to go in, back and forth because it's a shortcut to go somewhere. So that also catches my eye. I think this greatly reduces the chances that this was some random encounter. Michael walking down the street and some sex offender, child molester picks him up. Like, for example, what happened with Jacob Wetterling. So we have to think about that. And as I've already noted, looking at this map, this area is just as wide open can be. And 225 disappearances, having covered all of those for Unfound, this has to be one of the most wide open areas that I've ever seen that searches could be done. This would be considered to be a very easy area to search, in contrast to disappearances I've covered where it's wilderness, forest, bodies of water, valleys, ravines, places that are very steep, very difficult to get people into, even inaccessible by drones and ATVs, everything. So in my experience, this kind of area would be one of the easiest kinds to search. And still, Michael has not been found. So those are the things that I see regarding Michael's disappearance. Now, I have heard that they're going to start draining some of these ditches in the area. And I think that what I said about harvesting the fields is the same thing. If you're going to tell me that they're draining ditches 2 miles away, then I really have to question the logic of that. I do know that there's a couple small bodies of water right here that may be part of a drainage system or something, but these are not flowing bodies of water. They're stagnant water. So if Michael did fall into one of them and drowned, it would be obvious. In contrast, if he went into a river where he would, of course, get taken away. So any draining of ditches outside this immediate area, if there still are ditches that have not been drained out, just does not make a lot of sense to me, given his age, given that it was daylight, given the population all around here. It seems inconceivable to me that a 5-year-old could avoid everybody and get a couple miles away on his own. And so I will now go back to my discussion, and I will now go over the 3 points that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Okay, now I'm back. Before I get into these 3 points, I want to remind all of you to subscribe to this Unfound Podcast channel right here on YouTube. And please hit that little bell button so that when we upload videos such as this one, or when I do the live shows on Wednesday nights, you will be alerted so you don't miss anything. You can find Unfound on Facebook, the page, the discussion group. We have a Twitter account, we have an Instagram account, and we also have the website with a lot of great missing persons information on there, theunfoundpodcast.com. And if you'd like to contribute to the program, patreon.com/unfoundpodcast or paypal.me/unfoundpodcast. So let's start with point number 1 that I'd mentioned before. Once again, I had told you earlier, the mystery of incomplete news, age matters, and number 3, the truth about child disappearances. And if you see me looking off to my left, I guess you're right. I do not do these off the top of my head. Number 1, the mystery of incomplete news. I am recording this on September 27th of 2021. So Michael's disappearance is, I guess you would say, exactly 2 months old. Now, who knows when you'll be viewing this video? Maybe you're viewing it right after it was posted, or maybe you're looking at it many months or years down the road. But as of now, 2 months in, I'm a little amazed, or maybe I shouldn't be amazed, on how much information we still do not know about his disappearance. That, for example, there, as I just stated in the map portion of this video, somebody saw him out on the street by himself walking east. 2 months later, we have no idea who that is. Why is that? I don't know. This is more common than maybe all of you would realize, that many times when you see a story about a disappearance, the person was seen, they never say who saw the person. And I'm not saying it has to be named John Smith, Jane Doe saw Michael walking down the street, but it might be helpful for the rest of us if it is said a neighbor saw the person across the street, a neighbor down the street, an Amazon driver, a UPS driver saw Michael walking down the street. That it leaves it so wide open. My experience is that it creates rumors to get started. I would certainly like missing persons stories to be exact as possible. I can understand if people don't want their names mentioned. I get that. But there's the description should be a little more. It's very, what would they say, third person, Michael was seen instead of John Smith saw. Would like to, and it's a real mystery why that's not done. And as a person who I consider myself to be part of the media, it's still very confusing to me. But once again, we don't know who saw Michael out in that street. In addition, we don't know what he was doing out in the street by himself. If he was walking, why didn't somebody be a little more, proactive? Okay, there's this 5-year-old walking down the street by himself. Maybe I should go see what's up with that. That doesn't look right. Once again, this is, and we'll get into this in the second part, if he's 15, if he's 20, if he's 30, if he's 40, then I can see why that might not be a big curiosity to somebody. But being that he's 5, and I think he's 3 feet tall or something, you'd think people would be a little more interested in that. In addition, if this person, whoever did see Michael walking down the street, why did the person not do anything? I would also add, once again, the topic being the mystery of incomplete news, that this time frame is quite large. 6:30 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. That is a lot of time. I guess over the course of a life, 45 minutes is not long. But when it comes to disappearances, seconds matter. And that we don't have a more accurate idea of when Michael was seen, at least we to the public, it does put question marks in my mind. I know in my program, if you've listened to Unfound, really try to be as exact as possible. And I'm covering disappearances that could be decades old. And I'm still looking for, well, what time did somebody last see her? And still trying to narrow it down at least to an hour. Here we have a disappearance that's 2 months old, and the span is already out to 45 minutes. A span of 45 minutes in which Michael could have disappeared. That doesn't, I don't think that helps an investigation. What I would say to families regarding all of this is that you need to be as exact with the public as possible. And if you are finding that reporters in the area are not being that exact, then you should do that yourselves. That you can easily start a Facebook page, and for this example, Michael Vaughan, and say he was seen at exactly 6:43 p.m. by the neighbor across the street, walking east. The neighbor says that he didn't, do anything about it because he was on the phone, and he kind of lost track. He looked out there, and then Michael was gone. Whatever the story would be, that's more exact than what we have. And so, if you are a family out there that's trying to get word out about your missing loved one, whether it's a 5-year-old child or a 32-year-old woman, you need to get as much exact information out there as possible. Do not use people's names without asking them. But something descriptive as the neighbor across the street, an Amazon driver, a UPS driver, a pizza delivery guy, anybody who claims that he or she saw something, they should be described that way instead of kind of not mentioning it at all, because that only allows the public to start creating stories. Get that information out there. But this is common. What I'm saying here about the nebulous of some of this information is very common, and it's certainly something that can be easily fixed regarding the reporting of disappearances. It just doesn't seem like it's getting done. So moving on to number 2, age matters. Facts are facts. The fact is, a 5-year-old can walk down the street, a 25-year-old can walk down the street, a 75-year-old can walk down the street. But that does not mean that those disappearances are all the same. Certainly there is a difference. For example, if you have a 35-year-old where the story is he walked down the street, and then you have a story of a 20-year-old who walked down the street, yes, there's 15 years of difference, but I'm not sure, given everything else being the same, whether that really matters, that 15 years of difference. However, on the other hand, if you go from a 20-year-old to a 5-year-old, like in this situation with Michael's disappearance, it certainly matters. Then the circumstances are certainly different, because it's not unusual for a 20-year-old to be walking down the street by himself or herself. It certainly is rare and odd for a 5-year-old to be doing that. And so age certainly matters. There's no doubt about it. And what the kind of paradox here is that although we do not cover a lot of young people disappearances on the program, and once again, that'll be in part number 3, but point number 3, the disappearances of very, very young children, 5-year-olds, is about the same as how I would think about the disappearance of 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds. Once again, because both of those age groups, it's fairly odd to see them just walking down a street by themselves. For 5-year-olds, it's because their parents are supposed to be looking after them, and conscientious parents don't let their child walk out in the street unattended. Whereas when it comes to old people, 75-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 85-year-olds, due to usually their physical abilities. Where exactly are they going? How far are they going? Do they know what we're doing? Because then we have to start taking into account, is it possible this person might have dementia, Alzheimer's, walking down the street, maybe seemingly walking away from their home by themselves? This is something that I think usually catches people's attention. So everybody like in the middle, maybe from like 15 up to like 65, it's kind of the same. But you get to those extremes of human ages, the very young and the very old. It's weird how it all comes back around to when you see those particular groups walking down a street alone, that maybe not red flags should go up, but certainly some yellow flags should go up. And, I'll just give you some examples of what I mean. There was a disappearance that I covered back in 2017, the disappearance of Dominic Hawley Grisham. Disappearance, a young man, I think he was 16 years old, from Rochester, New York. He was home. His mother was going to be throwing a birthday party for him. He got a phone call on his cell. He walked out the front door of his home in Rochester, New York, never to be seen again. And I personally believe that his disappearance had something to do with a beef that he was having, maybe with people in his school, and it could possibly have involved a girl, Dominic, and a girl he was dating. They had recently broke up like a couple days before that. And to this day, my belief is that had something to do with Dominic's disappearance. But even so, I don't know how anybody would really be surprised that a 16-year-old gets a phone call on a cell phone and then goes outside. Maybe they're meeting somebody outside. Maybe they want privacy for this call, and that makes all the sense in the world. Whereas I covered the disappearance of Alwyn Albright much more recently here in 2021, where he seemingly walked away from his apartment and he was 74. And this is kind of what I'm saying, is that this is much odder, stranger, not as common. And so we have to think about this. So the facts may be the facts, the time of day, the date, the location, the weather. All of these things could be the same, but then just simply the person who went missing, whether there's a 5-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 75-year-old, can really change our perception of what that disappearance is. And I want you to remember that when you read accounts of disappearances, and really take into account what the age of that person is. And this could be not just walkaways, but all sorts of different circumstances. The difference between a 16-year-old driving away in a car and a 75-year-old driving away in the car. The age of the person must always be taken into account when you are analyzing this. And of course, it also helps if you know that person's background. Was that person having maybe signs of dementia if it's a really older person? Or a younger person, were they distraught about a relationship or something not going right in their life? Of course, the odds of a 20-something-year-old having dementia has to be 1 in the millions. So we must look at other issues. Whereas like with a 75-year-old, I don't know how many 75-year-olds are going to walk away feeling all distraught over the breakup of a relationship. So age really is important. And so when it comes to a 5-year-old, I even have to stress that more, that 5-year-olds, if they are walking away from their house, I'm not sure they have any particular goal in mind. It may just be they're just walking off and rambling around and being adventurous. So we have to take that into account. And that very well may be what happened with Michael's disappearance. We just don't know right now, 2 months in. So number 3, the third point that I want to make, using Michael's disappearance as a template, is that the truth about child disappearances. Here's the truth. Most disappearances of children are caused by their parents. It's not even close. Now, I just won't tell you that. The FBI will tell you that. When children experience violence in their lives, I'm not saying that they necessarily go missing, but sexual abuse, just physical abuse, mental abuse, anything like that, most of the time it is by their parents. I'm not saying that happened in this situation, but that's the truth about child disappearances. I have no idea what happened here. Okay, I have no idea. If I knew, I would be calling authorities in Idaho, in Fruitland, Idaho, and telling them right now. And I would urge any of you who are watching this video, if you think you know something about Michael Vaughan's disappearance, then please call authorities right now. But those are the stats. Now, I said a couple times already, there's a reason, because of that, that's the main reason we do not cover very, very young people's disappearances on Unfound, because most of the time it is the parents. And so then it's hard for me to talk to anybody who can be trusted. And so I never want to interview somebody for the program who I believe is innocent, but they actually end up being guilty. Now, I only did that once, and that was with the murder of Janelle Matthews. Steve Pankey was the guest, and now he's on trial for murder in Colorado. But it's a totally different situation. That was a very unique set of circumstances. But, so I haven't covered many. In fact, I think when it comes to teenagers and younger, out of 225 disappearances, maybe covered 30. So maybe a little over 10%, but not many. But I'm going to give you some of the facts about some of these child disappearances that I've covered. Andrea Bowman, also known as Alexis, she was murdered by the father who adopted her in Michigan in 1989. Ashley Summers in Cleveland, Ohio. I think she was 14. I don't have it written on my notes, but I think she was 14 years old. She was most likely killed by her uncle, who is now in jail for sexual molestation of children. Alyssa Turney from Arizona. Her father is going to be going on trial for the murder of her. Now, it wasn't her biological father. It was Alyssa's stepfather, but still, it's a parent. And he's going to be going on trial for Alyssa's disappearance. To my knowledge, her remains have not been found anywhere. Juanita Nelson, that's a disappearance I covered in early 2019. At least to me, I believe there is a decent possibility that her father had something to do with her disappearance. No proof of that, but it's certainly something that I talked about in entertaining the idea at the time. Also recently, I covered the disappearance of Toby Anderson. He was a teenager who most likely was murdered by his uncle, who is in jail for abusing other children. And so these are just some examples, and I could go on with some other disappearances that we've covered where family members and or parents are involved. Those are the stats. So I realize that when people think about children going missing, they automatically think about sex offenders. And I've been reading some stories, I've gone to Web Sleuths and seen what people have been saying and doing regarding Michael's disappearance. And some have looked up, well, what does the sex offender map say for Fruitland? Are there sex offenders in the area? There are. But even though the public may think that children are made to disappear by sex offenders who are strangers, although that does happen, it is a very, very small percentage of those types of crimes. Very small percentage. The Jacob Wetterlings, this is a disappearance going back to Minnesota, was it the late 80s, early 1990s? He was abducted and murdered by a stranger. But those kinds of incidents are rare. So when you hear about sex offenders and you see them on a map, most likely they are sex offenders for what? Molesting their own children. Molesting the children of a new girlfriend. maybe being in a position, at a daycare center or a Boy Scout leader or something like that, where this person had access to children and abused them in those particular situations. That is much more common than a stranger just showing up somewhere in a car and molesting a child on the street. So we have to keep that in mind. In addition, a lot of those sex offenders, although it's all horrible, they could have been a 35-year-old who, for example, raped a 15-year-old. And so they're into a different age group, different circumstances, and that certainly matters. Although they all are still all horrible, we certainly have to look at the circumstances on how they became sex offenders. So I know some of you are going to look into that. Is it possible that 5-year-old Michael Vaughan was walking down that street and a sex offender in a car drove by and picked him up, abducted him? Absolutely possible. But I would say the odds are very, very low. My experience, once again, in looking at the map, seeing where it is, knowing how the news has been very nebulous regarding his disappearance, I think that at this point, anything should be on the table regarding his disappearance. So that is this Unfound Now, discussing the disappearance, the 2-month-old disappearance of 5-year-old Michael Vaughan from Fruitland, Idaho. I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. I hope you will give this video a thumbs up, and thank you for watching.